My Hero Academia is a world where being a superhero isn't just about power. It's a regulated profession. You need training, discipline, and above all of that, you need a license to be able to do hero work. And that's why going to a prestigious school like UA is so important. It puts you on the proper path. It teaches you what you need to be a true hero. But what if someone new was added to the mix? What if instead of the traditional Class 1A that we know and love, what if someone else joined the class? And not just anyone, someone who is notorious for being undisciplined, for not listening to the rules, and are known for regularly questioning other people's authority. Would they adapt to the way things are, follow the path that UA presents, and become a true hero? Or would they completely break under that system? Well, that's what we're talking today, because today we're talking My Hero Academia meets Homelander. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, My Hero Academia Class 1A gets a new classmate, that being Homelander. So first and foremost, we have to de-age Homelander. We are going to take Homelander before even the times of the Boys Diabolical. So this is going to be important because I do believe that Homelander during the time of the Boys Diabolical is a lot less evil than he is even at the start of the Boys Season 1. So this is going to be important. However, that being said, we are going to keep intact everything else with his backstory. In this world, Vought is still going to exist. Vought would have still created him to be the perfect hero. They would have still psychologically manipulated him for practically his whole life. He would have endured a lot of the same things. However, in this scenario, they are sending him to UA. They want him to gain an actual hero's license. And in order to do that, sending him to the top school is probably the best bet. So how would this exactly play out? Well, first and foremost, we know how the entrance exam goes. There is going to be a written portion, and although Homelander doesn't display any type of genius level intellect, considering the fact that someone like Mineta or Kaminari was able to pass the written exam and they are shown to not be the smartest people, I do believe that Homelander would be able to pull off a passing grade, at least in the written portion. Now, when it comes to the actual practical test, this is where Homelander is going to truly shine. We know that Bakugo was the one to get the top score. Even though he didn't get any rescue points, he destroyed enough of those robots to earn himself the top spot in Class 1A. However, in this scenario, I do believe that honor would be given to Homelander. Because of his sheer speed, strength, and abilities, he would be able to absolutely wipe out all of the robots so much more quickly than Bakugo was able to do. And there is a case to be made that he would probably be able to destroy that giant 0-point robot with relative ease. Now, the question would be, would Homelander actually do that? Especially since it's explained that those are worth 0 points. Would Homelander truly care about saving his classmates in that moment? And in my opinion, the version of Homelander that we're going with in this scenario would probably care about his classmates. Because keep in mind, Homelander in the Boys Diabolical did genuinely care about being a hero. Even though his mind was pretty twisted already by this point, he still genuinely wanted to be a beloved hero by the public. So in this scenario, I do believe that he would attempt to stop the 0-point robot. So this would very likely give him not only a ton of regular points, he would also get multiple rescue points for at least attempting to take down this 0-point robot. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I do think he would be able to take down the 0-point robots very easily as well, just given his sheer power. So that being said, after the conclusion of the test, it would be revealed that Homelander did indeed pass, but not only that, he actually got the top score in the entire class, taking that spot from Bakugo. Now, that does mean that one person from Class 1A is going to have to be eliminated to make a spot for Homelander, and unfortunately for the 1 or 2 Mineta fans that exist out there, Mineta is absolutely going to be the expendable one in this scenario. First and foremost, because I think he would be the one that would have the worst interactions with Homelander, but also I personally do not understand how Mineta even passed the practical exam. I feel like his quirk is really stupid, and he as an overall character just absolutely sucks. Again, if you love Mineta, more power to you, but I personally am not a fan, so I have no issue cutting him out, especially for the purpose of this video. So that being said, we now have all of Class 1A joined together. It is revealed that Homelander got the top score, and from a lot of the class, they are going to praise Homelander. However, once Mr. Aizawa does enter the room, things are going to change, and like we saw in the anime, Mr. Aizawa is going to test all of the students. He's going to put them through that same fitness test. However, this is going to be a fitness test that Homelander once again is going to thrive in. When it comes to throwing the ball, he is going to have a score that is comparable to Uraraka. And when it comes to the mini race that they have, whether it is the short distance race or the long distance race, Homelander is going to win those races very easily. I do believe that he has shown speeds that far surpass what what Ida can get up to, at least at this point in this story. So considering that, that gives Homelander already 3 insane scores on this test. So it would stand to reason that he'd probably score number 1 in this practical exam as well. However, there are things like the long jump that he'd also probably score a top score in as well. When it comes to toe touches or sit-ups, I don't think those are really going to be anything that he is going to have a bad score in. So there is no way that he is going to be the one that is expelled. We know it probably would have been Deku. However, like we saw in the anime, because he learns to control his power, Mr. Aizawa ended up giving him a chance and did not expel him on the spot. However, I do think that Homelander would see Deku as someone inferior that can only use his great strength when he breaks his body, whereas Homelander, on the other hand, can use all of his insane abilities without any damage to his actual person. So this would create a dynamic that is similar to the one that Bakugo has with Deku, except it would be a lot more negative, and there wouldn't be any positivity on the side from Deku going towards Homelander, because they wouldn't be two people that ever grew up together. It would be much more like how Todoroki and Deku were at the very beginning. However, there would be no connection established between the two of them, and this would be pretty important, especially later on. However, after all of Class 1A does pass Mr. Aizawa's test, they are going to have that combat training with All Might, and in this scenario, I don't think it really matters who Homelander is paired up with. I think whoever their partner is going to be able to coast by in this combat exercise very easily. However, for the sake of fun for the video, we are going to match him up against Todoroki, and although I would like to say that anyone in Class 1A, specifically Todoroki, would be able to have a chance in this combat exercise against Homelander, I don't think anyone by this point in time would be able to have a chance against Homelander at all. The only person that maybe could have a semblance of a chance would be Deku. However, he would have to use probably 100% of his power, and there is an argument to be made that a different percentage of his power would be able to be used. However, considering the fact that by this point, Deku doesn't have the ability to use a certain percentage of his power, that's quite literally the problem at this point. He can either use all of it or none of it. So I feel like a fight against Deku probably wouldn't be interesting at all. He would maybe get 1 or 2 shots in before he breaks all of his limbs, and that's even if he had the ability to catch Homelander in this moment, because as I mentioned in a previous video, All Might could absolutely reach speeds that surpass Homelander, but Deku, at least in the beginning, absolutely cannot. But since that is the case, Homelander would once again shine in this combat exercise. However, there would be a slight caveat, and that slight caveat is if Homelander doesn't hold back and accidentally kills one of the UA students, this would be an egregious act and would absolutely lead to him being expelled and propel him down a very negative route. That very negative route would likely end up being All Might, the symbol of peace, having to face off against an evil Homelander. However, considering the fact that I literally just recently did a video on that, go check that one out if you want to see how that would play out. So for the sake of this video, we're going to go with a version of Homelander that isn't going to just off people. He's able to regulate his power enough to the point where he doesn't just murder people when he uses his laser vision or his super strength. And considering the fact that this is an anime world, a lot of the characters do have some type of inherent durability, because we've seen them take some pretty crazy attacks, and although they definitely take on damage, they don't just splatter like they would in the Invincible universe or in the Boys universe. So we also have to keep that in mind. Now, after this, the next major event that would occur would be the attack on the USJ, and in this scenario, I feel like Homelander would shine so much. If he is one of the students that is separated from the teachers and the rest of the class, whoever from Class A gets separated and is in a location with Homelander and other villains, they are going to be so absolutely safe, because Homelander is going to be able to take out every single one of those villains. And there's even an argument to be made that someone like Shigaraki would stand no chance against Homelander, at least at this point in time. So he'd probably be able to swoop in and save Mr. Aizawa. Now, when it would come to someone like Nomu, I do not believe that Homelander would have the abilities to take down this insane threat. I think his only true path to victory going against Nomu would be using his laser vision at full power and hope that it would negate the regeneration. This is something that we've seen Endeavor be able to do if you can generate enough intense heat. Incinerated cells can't actually regenerate. However, by this point in time, I don't believe Homelander would be able to create that level of heat to destroy Nomu on a cellular level. However, that being said, Homelander would still be able to put up a decent fight against Nomu, even though it would eventually lead to Homelander being defeated and All Might needing to swoop in to save the day. Although, instead of how all of Class A was incredibly happy to see All Might, I feel like Homelander would feel a little slighted in this moment. He would feel like he failed in this moment. He would feel like he was supposed to be the one who was a hero. But when it was his big moment, he failed. So he would feel incredibly down on himself after this moment, and this would propel him going on further in the story. So after the USJ incident, we would obviously go to the sports festival. And at the sports festival, as we know, Bakugo was the one to speak in front of everyone. So in this scenario, Homelander would be the one to speak. And similarly to Bakugo, Homelander would proclaim himself to be the winner essentially already. He would say that he is above everyone else. His speech would be very similar to Bakugo's as far as being very arrogant and pretentious. However, Homelander's would go a couple steps beyond that, because keep in mind, he just had a major blow to his ego at the USJ incident. Although he was able to stop a ton of the different villains, he was ultimately unable to take down the big bad villain that was there. And this would definitely hurt his ego. So he would proclaim to the entire festival that he is absolutely going to win, that he is above everyone here. And although a lot of people would not take this very well, specifically the other students and the teachers at UA, I do believe that in the very first event, Homelander would showcase why he said this in the first place. He would dominate that first race so easily. He would win virtually immediately. We've seen Homelander use insane speed throughout the course of The Boys and The Boys Diabolical. So it would stand to reason that he would be able to essentially blow past every single other participant in this competition. So he would likely end up with the #1 score. However, his next issue would be in the cavalry battle, because as we saw in the original story, when Deku had 1,000,000 points, a lot of people didn't want to be paired up with him. However, a big reason they didn't want to be paired up with him was because he didn't showcase any of his abilities during the race. So they thought this was just someone with essentially no abilities that could be controlled that had 1,000,000 points. They saw him as a sitting duck. However, if they see the powers and abilities at least a little bit of Homelander and see that he literally has 1,000,000 points, I think a couple people would want to join him in this scenario. And I do personally believe that he'd end up winning the cavalry battle. I don't see a scenario in which anyone would have the ability to take a headband off of Homelander's head. I think his reaction time is way too fast for any of this to happen. And depending on who he's paired up with in this cavalry battle, it would make it that much easier for him and his team to prevail in this scenario. However, that would bring us to the one-on-one battles. And as I mentioned before, Homelander is definitely going to be in these battles. And in my opinion, the only fights that would give Homelander any kind of actual fight would be against Todoroki, Deku, and Bakugo. Now, as we know, Deku going up against Homelander would not do virtually anything, although he would have the ability to break his fingers by this point, utilize his powers a little bit before absolutely breaking. I don't think the amount of power that he can use at this point would be enough to actually damage Homelander. The only way he could do anything to Homelander is if he used a full power smash like he used against Todoroki in their final clash. However, considering Homelander's speed, I don't know that this attack would necessarily land, and this is a fight that the teachers might actually intervene in. But either way, this is a battle that Deku is not going to win. And if we go on to Todoroki, unfortunately, even though he is my favorite character in the entire series, I do not believe Todoroki at this point would have the ability to defeat Homelander, specifically because he doesn't have a full mastery of his left side at this point. If he could utilize some of his insane power attacks like Endeavor can use, I do believe there is an argument to be made that Todoroki would be able to defeat Homelander in this moment. However, because he can't, Homelander would be able to smash through Todoroki's ice pretty easily, especially with his laser vision. So considering that, it would stand to reason that Homelander would be victorious in this battle, and that would leave Homelander going up against Bakugo. And while I do think there is a scenario in which Bakugo's attacks are able to do damage to Homelander and damage enough to actually take him out of this fight, I think the one difference in this battle would be their speed. At this point, Bakugo does not show the ability to be nearly as fast as Homelander is in this moment, so I do believe that although this would be the closest fight we'd have at the festival, I do also believe that Homelander would ultimately be victorious, and this would actually do a lot of bad things to his ego. It would show him that he is truly above his classmates, and it would show him that he is better than all of them. And at the final ceremony, he would probably say something to that effect, and all of the UA teachers would probably take note of this. And as they take note of this, when it comes time for the work studies, although he would have a lot of offers, I feel like they would regulate who he is able to go to. They wouldn't just let him go to the most powerful hero and learn under them. They would make sure they handpick who Homelander goes to. And this would probably irritate Homelander. However, again, since we've already seen Homelander go down the path of villainy in the My Hero universe, we are going to still have him as a hero in this world. And realistically, I could see him going to a couple different hero agencies. However, in truth, I do believe no matter who he goes to, he's not going to listen to authority that well. He is going to go off on his own and try to save people on his own. And while in the moment this could lead to some pretty good things. Overall, it is going to lead to Homelander being punished in some way. However, over the course of time, I do believe that Homelander is going to start to come around to some people. One person in particular would be Todoroki. You see, I believe that Homelander would form a connection with Todoroki because Shoto, to a degree, would be able to understand some of the things Homelander has gone through. Although Todoroki hasn't gone through the level of torture that Homelander has gone through, or the psychological manipulation, he has been manipulated in a way by his father since birth to take down and surpass All Might, to grow his power to a point that surpasses his own father. He was trained until he literally couldn't stand anymore, and it got so bad that his mom literally poured boiling water on his face, permanently scarring him. So I feel like he and Homelander would be able to definitely trauma bond in a way, and I feel like this bond would become incredibly important because a true bond and a true friendship is something that Homelander never truly had in the boys universe. And anytime he had any semblance of a true friendship, I feel like that was a moment we saw a very human version of Homelander, at least the most human version that we would have gotten in that universe. So if hypothetically Todoroki would be able to break through those walls that Homelander has, I feel like Homelander would become a much different person, a much better person, and he would start to thrive in Class 1A. And I feel like some other people in the class and in UA as a whole would start to admire Homelander. And although this could be a negative boost to his ego, I think it would also give him a sense of worth and a sense of belonging in this place. He'd no longer be someone just created by Vought. He would be a hero core student with people that truly value him. And I feel like the ultimate end to this story would actually be people at UA, teachers included, going up against Vought and realizing that Vought isn't a good superhero organization and they're actually pretty evil. They probably learn a lot about what happened to Homelander as he opens up and gets closer to his classmates at UA. Someone like Aizawa and All Might would hear about the things that Vought did, and All Might specifically would have major issues with this. And even if he wouldn't just waltz in there and smash everything to pieces, I think he would have the power and the pull to be able to get the proper authorities involved and get them to strictly monitor Vought as an organization, changing them for the better. And if this would happen, then Homelander would be free to be an actual hero, not just a corporate hero like he is in The Boys. And after this happens, I do believe that Homelander relatively easily would be able to get his provisional license. We saw the provisional licensing exam, and it isn't anything too difficult for Homelander to overcome. Now, would the rescue training be a little bit more difficult for him? Yes, probably. However, it also stands to reason that if he attempts to rescue anyone and simply carries them off to safety using his flight, he wouldn't have many points taken away from him. Flying people off to safety is usually a good move, especially if you are physically carrying them. We saw Deku do this. Even though he wasn't flying, he was still using full cowling to carry victims away. And when a villain inevitably attacks, Homelander would probably be one of the people that stands on the front line to stop the villain from attacking the evacuation area. And this would give Homelander some pretty high marks. I don't see a scenario in which Homelander loses more than 49 points, which means Homelander would objectively pass, gaining his provisional hero license. And after this, it would just keep going up from there. Yes, there would be villains that are still on the rise, someone like All For One, Shigaraki, and Stain. However, I feel like with Homelander added to Class 1A, a lot of these situations would be a lot easier. A fight against Stain would be way easier with Homelander there. Even a fight against Shigaraki is definitely easier with Homelander there. Now, someone like All For One is going to be far too powerful for Homelander to truly deal with, especially on his own. However, because of the person that Homelander would change into, he would see this not as a blow to his ego, but as a reason to train and get stronger. And considering the fact that we've never actually seen Homelander go through an actual training arc, this could give him levels of power unlike any we've ever seen, propelling him to be one of the top heroes in MHA. Now, would this lead him to graduating UA and becoming a top 2 or 3 hero? In my opinion, no, probably not. I do believe that the top heroes would probably be the same, mostly because of their personalities. However, it does stand to reason that Homelander could absolutely make it into the top 10, and there is a case to be made that he could end up a top 5 hero in the MHA universe, especially if he focuses on the bonds that he formed with Class 1A. Those would be absolutely key to him truly becoming a hero and him remaining on the path of good. But I'm interested to hear from all of you. How do you think Homelander would fit into Class 1A? Do you think he would end up a hero, or do you think he would clash too much with his other classmates? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.